Call this Personnel Committee meeting to order September 11th at 5:01 p.m. Roll call. Tracy Pollock. Here. Kim Higginbotham.
Here.
Russ Ewart. Here. Item 3, agenda revisions and approval.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Tracy with the motion, Kim with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Item 4, approval of minutes, August 28th meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the August 28th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Second.
Kim with the motion to approve, Tracy with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes. Item 5, reports and updates. This will be the bulk of the meeting. We'll go item 5A, teacher resignations. And with us we have Mike Nowak.
Thank you. And just to clarify, teacher resignations and teacher contracts are being brought today to personnel. We haven't done that in the past. We've taken these directly to the board meetings. And I think the idea here is give personnel a look at it, gain some understanding prior to those two items going to the consent agenda at the full board meeting on the 25th. So the first one is a teacher resignation. If you remember back to the last board meeting, we had many in this area. We have one to bring forward tonight. Thomas Sala presented or submitted a letter of resignation on Wednesday, August 30th. Thomas was hired in July of 2023 as a special education teacher at Germantown High School. This particular individual worked the first few days of school. It's my understanding he accepted employment in the Shorewood School District. As part of this process, he paid his liquidated damages, and it comes to the board for final release on the 25th.
Okay. Does anyone have questions on that? No, I guess my only question is, do we have a reason as to why we had it so late, other than the new employment?
The
What was-
resignation?
Yeah.
Oh, no, this is, it was,
It happened during pre-session.
yeah, it happened August 30th.
Yeah.
So this is the soonest.
No. It seems to be late in the start of the school year, I should say, for a resignation to come in and accept employment. That seems unusual. Usually
Yeah.
it seemed to be that prior window earlier in August.
Yeah, this is I mean, in a nutshell, this is a candidate new to the area from another state. Somewhat unique family situation relative to where they live, and my gut feel is that proximity played a lot into this relative to the district that he wanted. We were disappointed. We felt this person had an awful lot of potential for us. We're a little confused by it. I've seen it happen before though, and it's unfortunate. Doesn't leave us in a good situation, but we do feel good about the candidates that we got in.
Sure. Yeah, I just saw that July 23rd and then obviously August 30th.
No,
So
this person went through in service, and literally all indications were that everything was going fine. It literally happened on a lunch period. We believe that there's probably an offer made from another district, and the decision followed. So that's why it's here today.
There was nothing we could do to retain at that point. I mean,
Um,
I guess I'll ask this. So in a situation like that, obviously there's a lot that goes into it, and maybe the candidate shares or doesn't share the totality of the decision making with you. But when we have that person in house, are there any attempts to be made as far as retention competitively to whatever they're receiving elsewhere?
Yeah, every situation is different. So if this were, in this particular situation, there was a pretty much immediate phone call to the candidate for some explanation as to what was occurring. Sometimes in those situations, it's you can see right away that it's a financial move. Some district has offered a significant amount more. That's not what this was, and actually the explanation that was given to me, I don't know that I honestly trust in retrospect now. What I was led to believe is that it was about fit. The school that this person had come from was smaller in scope, and that was the explanation that I got, which there wasn't much we could do at that point. There was, again, I knew enough about the person and kind of the situation they were in to realize this is where we were. But in retrospect now, I know that there was employment in another district, so that obviously was part of it.
Okay.
But to answer your question, yes, absolutely, there's always attempts to, if we really want to, there's attempts to try to get to the bottom of the situation and retain if possible.
Sure. Thank you. Item 5B, teacher contracts.
There are 3 contracts to bring forward this evening. The first 2 are special education teachers, one being a replacement for the resignation that I just explained. First is Morgan Workus. It's a 1.0 limited term contract, and all of these are limited term at this point. It's 185 days at $42,355. The second is Ian McLavery. He is a special education teacher that comes to us from Elmbrook, where he was an aide. He's just attained his licensure as a special education teacher. He has a master's degree, so his overall pay is a little higher. He's at 185 days at $46,250. And then the last is Lucas Halvasek. He is a language arts teacher that will be coming to us. He right now is teaching in Texas and is trying to secure his departure there to get back here. He formerly taught in Mequon. We feel very strong about the experience that he brings, and we have a long-term sub in the role right now, but he'll transition into that. That is 154 limited term contract, 154-day limited term contract at $54,305. Again, no recommendation tonight, no action, but
Yep.
I would add something, Mr. Nock, if that's okay. The first employee, Morgan Workus, we looked at our aid allocation, our support
Yes.
staff aid, and we reallocated 3.5 aides equal a FTE in the teacher realm. And knowing that special education is an area of high need, we felt that reallocating and eliminating 3.5 aides and bringing in a certified special education teacher to reduce caseload size at the high school level and have someone that is trained, skilled, and has a degree in given field would be more beneficial to our student body with IEPs than 3.5 aides. And it's a wash when it comes to cost.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I think it's a great idea. I did note the difference in salaries, but you kind of explained the difference in experience and or educational basis for that.
Yep, that happens every time we bring these forward. So, when we're in a situation of hiring in particular teachers, but the same thing happens with, most other certified positions. We look at experience, we look at the market, we look at education that they have, and we make decisions based on, what the particular candidate offers us. All 3 of these are limited term contracts, so it's a little different in that regard. But, part of what I do, part of my job is to get to know these people and to assess what their potential is to us. And, as I started with a resignation of someone that we were very excited about, you quickly get to know the new candidates that are coming in, and I feel really good about all of them. In particular, the 2 special ed teachers, special education teachers. As we look at our program, in this case at the high school, and the likelihood of how those departments will evolve in time because of retirements, I feel very good about what these candidates offer us.
Very good. Any questions? All right. 5C, staffing update.
So, this is new, and I've had some conversation with Mr. Ewert about what we want this to look like, along with district administrators, too. You see, there's a few things. This in particular is global in scope. So this begins to paint a picture for us of staff movement beyond our certified staff. We've always given you on a monthly or somewhat usually monthly basis our teacher and administrator movements. But this document, the sheet that you see right here, begins to paint a picture of all of the ins and outs. And this particular one is rather lengthy because of the time of year, and it reflects pretty much everything that's happened since, probably mid-June, the end of school. So there's an awful lot there. I was sharing with Mr. Ewert, you'll notice if you look closely, there's one advisor that's listed here. As we did this, we also had coaches and other advisors woven in, and we thought at this time it was appropriate to take them out. And we kind of deal with them more on a seasonal or a yearly basis with Sarah's reports. So we took it out. We could easily put those in. Our thought process was if we need to remove a coach or if a coach departs, that's something that usually is because of some significant situation that you'll be aware of. So we can go either way with it, but we felt appropriate this time to pull those off. So you see there kind of a picture of who's coming in, who they're replacing. It's good information. What isn't listed here, which I want to share, is rationale, at least some type of data points for why these employees are departing. We have a good pulse on why our teachers are leaving, why our administrators leaving in those certified positions, but we don't necessarily with others. And I think the work will be to start to get to that place. I'm going to share I don't have enough for everybody, but at least the committee members and as far as we go. This is a concept that we took from another district and modified it a little bit to be ours. That we would use a document like this in any situation where an employee is leaving us, and we would ask them to provide rationale as to why. First off, giving us the home address and that information is very important because we have to maintain contact, and sometimes that becomes difficult, so we would have that. The next part is that place where we would ask them to identify a primary reason for their departure. So every month, and granted the list that you'll see won't be as long as this on a monthly basis, my guess it's probably going to be maybe 15 tops, at 12 to 15. I could be wrong on that, but along with those 12 to 15 names, you'll also get explanation, not necessarily person by person, but you'll get a pooling of data as to why people are leaving. So on a monthly basis, we'll start to get a feel for general themes as to, hopefully, general themes as to why people are leaving positions in the district. So this is a work in progress, but we feel good about it. The rest of this form asks some general questions about what people enjoyed about working in the district, what would have kept them, so in other words, what could we have improved on, and then the back section on that back page provides notice information about resignation. So in the case of teachers and administrators or certified staff, what are timelines for letting us know that they're leaving? Likewise, with non-certified staff, what do they need to provide us with? Some of that circles back to handbook language, But we felt just as a starting point, we wanted to get some of this on this document for clarification. They would sign. This would also be an opportunity for us to work from an offboarding perspective in terms of unifying when someone leaves, where they would sort of centralize the process. The HR department and office would become kind of a go-to for things like keys, fobs, turning in technology and those kinds of things. Then we would dispense to departments. So, awful lot there, but we're excited about this process.
The only remark that I would kind of have on this is, you have another district and another career path. Those are kind of like, there may be a primary reason, but why would you go to choose another career path? Why would you choose another school district? Is it pay? Is it beliefs? Is it not lack of support? So instead of having those two on there, they're kind of like, yeah, I left, but this is really why I left.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Otherwise, it'd be just easy enough to check another school district or another career path, and we've learned nothing.
Right. I'm trying to process this. So compensation is something we potentially really want to know, and that may not say it.
Right, or the beliefs of the district, or, we don't match the communal values here. So
Yeah.
that's more important for us to know than just that you went to another district or
Right.
you did
Yeah,
another path.
yeah, if you're asking someone to check one and they say another career path, but we would like to know, is it something within these walls that caused you to do
Right.
that?
Right.
Or maybe something outside of these walls that caused you to do that. But we would never understand that if they just checked that.
Right. I think, again, this is a starting point, and I
Yeah.
agree with wholeheartedly you're saying. Like, it becomes a question of how granular can you get.
I think you could have two sections though. One, what are you doing? And two, why are we leaving here
Right.
to do that?
Right.
And those are both really good data points to Kim's
Okay.
point.
Well, I bring this forward just to.
Yeah, this is a draft.
Yeah,
And we-
exactly.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I mean, we want to know why teachers are leaving or coming, or,
Yeah.
what's the drawbacks, but it's just, that would just be too easy to check. All right, done, decision form. See how that goes.
They almost, whatever they check, they almost didn't explain why, right?
Mhm.
So if it's pay,
Right.
why? Because I feel like I'm undercompensated
Right.
given people in my department or grade levels or surrounding districts, so that we have a little more depth to
Mhm.
the
Need
data.
a little meat in there besides just a box.
Yeah.
That does show itself. I think the same thing you're talking about shows in the next report, the teacher retention report. So I'm guessing we're going to talk about the same exact thing when we get there.
Mhm.
And we know a little more there, but I think what you're saying still kind of applies. Any questions though with the process, as well as this being kind of what will be normal practice on a monthly basis?
I guess I'll start with the 5 vacant at the bottom,
Oh, sure. Yep.
which I wasn't expecting to not be, given our last meeting.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if we have an update on those.
Yeah, let me give it a shot. Social worker, I know there was a potential candidate that was interviewed. I don't. know-
Just this afternoon.
Yeah, I don't really can speak
Prior to tonight's
right.
meetings.
Right. Then there's also the potential of a part-time social worker that could be a possibility as well. So no closure.
But
Maintenance.
one or the other in that scenario, not.
It'd be one or the other.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
But
The two maintenance positions, Brittany, do you want to speak to those?
Sure. We filled one of the positions, as you can see right above that. One of the other positions, the person emailed us today after we gave them a tour of our buildings. That's not why they didn't take the job, but just so you know, we've spent many days with them, and then they decided they were not going to take the position and didn't give an answer why. But it was a 2.5 week process that it was probably best. that they did not take the position. And then, the last one is unfilled. As of tomorrow, they will be reposted, on weekend again.
I can speak to the interpreter position.
Mhm.
Mrs. Callen and I and the People Service Department have been working with outside vendors. This is a position across the region that is almost impossible to fill. This was a topic of conversation with our area superintendent meeting 3 weeks ago, because there are less and less interpreters, sign language interpreters, and the need is so high right now in public education. Some districts are working on joint contracts together to share services, knowing that most of the time CISA and other outside vendors are utilized and we build contracts with them. A lot of interpreters know that the market is calling, so
Mhm.
they are not working with outside contracting services and have gone out on their own and then charging higher rates. So we are working with Solient and Pi, which are two services we've used in the past in the district, and we are continually working with their leadership team to look for interpreting services. We have subs that are coming in through there, but we want to solidify people for the year as we have some unique needs within the district. So it's been an ongoing thing for probably throughout the entire summer we've been working. We thought we had 2 different people secured, and then they're outbid by other districts, and we don't have a chance to bid back, and they sign contracts to go to other districts as well. So not many districts have full-time interpreters. You'll see in this report, we hired a deaf and hard of hearing teacher because of our population of a high need of deaf and hard of hearing. It was more cost-effective than contracting with CISA, as well as it allowed us to have our own employee to build our programming and have them under the guise of Germantown School District. We have the same thing posted for interpreting services on weekend, but we're also working with outside vendors. We're just trying to find bodies at this point that can, obviously quality people that can service the needs.
So, but the hours that we would have, or like our need for fill, would require an employee and not a contracted position?
Either.
Could be
We're,
either.
we're open to either, so.
Well, I mean, we're open to either, but cost effectively, which is the,
It would probably make sense to have our own, but then it's getting people, a couple that have been interviewed, they don't want to work full-time, so you're trying to.
Yeah, yeah.
2.5 people to fill one position because I only want to
Got it.
work 20 hours at an X
Yeah.
dollar amount, right?
Yep.
It becomes a very interesting comparison, because as you talk about employees that are ours versus from outside groups, the pay in some of those outside groups appears, there's sticker shock at how much it is, but then you start to break down our cost and things like retirement contributions, or in some situations,
Yeah.
insurance costs and all those. There's a lot there.
And that's-
that
that's why I
you
asked that
realize.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In CISA 1, I was speaking to their executive director last Friday, and she shared with me that even people they had that have historically worked for them in these given fields have said, well, I'm resigning from CISA because I'm going to be an independent contractor and I can fetch double what I was making under the CISA contracting services. So it's a high need area.
Yep.
Not that we're not working to fill those as we
No,
legal
I
obligation do.
don't think that's the case. It is what it is. We might have to get competitive, right?
We are.
Brittany will let us know if we can do that.
She's right there every time we hand her paperwork. So.
Yeah. Okay. Did anyone have any other questions on this particular topic? I think Mike had mentioned that he and I had several conversations around this, specifically what this committee goals are moving forward, and a big portion of that is to keep a pulse of the ingoing, outgoing personnel and personnel matters of the district, so we can advise the board in a stronger capacity and more frequently, especially given we're doing the compensation study, have some other things coming up, and similar situations like we see with this interpreter situation, where the world is dictating new terms for us. So this can only help it strengthen the board. I would assume next time we see this list, it'll be a little smaller, just because it's not coinciding with the beginning of a school year and people are settled in. So we'll kind of see throughout the school year what the inbound, outbound employee prospects look like. Should make a little more sense as we get through a full calendar year of this. We'll see how that cycle bears out. So I'm excited for that, to arm the board with a little more knowledge on this side of the discussion. So, thank you, Mike.
Yeah, and I think the theme, to your point, themes will emerge and will be basis for discussion.
Yeah. That we'll collect it through the data points, and then we can attack it the right way, right?
Yep.
Okay, D, teacher retention report.
This is a report that I think we first introduced it in 21-22. We did not use this last year, but it provides, over the course of several years, going back to 16-17, an overview of our departures. Now, these departures are not, we'll call them voluntary resignations. So they're not retirements or people that have gone through non-renewal process. They're people that are actively making the decision, I'm going to be somewhere else, right? The big takeaways here are, this past year at 19, it's one of our highest levels of turnover. It is the highest level of turnover that we've had. That percentage is based on the teacher count, and last year at 16, relatively high. It's just coming out right now, but as we look at these numbers compared to other districts, I know even last year, we were surprisingly on the low side, even with that 16 amount last year. And I think the same thing is going to bear out this year. In our surrounding districts, we're in an environment now where there's much more movement. It's not the day of I start my teaching career in one place and I'm there for 30 years, unfortunately. And, in some districts, there's just far more movement than others. The next part of this that I wanted to talk about was the 4 areas that are referenced. And I think what Kim was bringing up earlier holds true here. One of the key indicators here is leaving for a new position, which may not tell the whole story. I know there's really 2 pieces to that. Being the primary ones are, I'm going to a place where I'm getting more pay, or another one, then, and I would ask the others to speak to this if they see fit. A common one too is I'm going to teach in a place closer to home. Maybe I live in Pewaukee and I've been offered a job to teach there or something like that. We had that occur in Slinger with Slinger this year. It seemed to be pretty typical. So of that new position one, that's the one that's, to me, is of concern. I think any HR person or any school person would say the same thing. That one is of significant concern because those are people who are, leaving us to do a similar type of job elsewhere. The other areas, the relocation, career change, and leaving the profession, just for sake of definition, relocation is literally someone moving out of state, going somewhere else, or a significant distance away. Maybe their spouse has been transferred. The career change, and I couldn't fit it on here, but is also about advancement. So, in some cases, people are moving into an instructional coaching role from a teaching role, or an administrative role from a teaching role. Oftentimes those experiences don't present themselves here, and or in your home district, and you're posed with the opportunity to expand yourself elsewhere. So that's what you see. And then the one about leaving the profession, this past year, that 5 is one of the highest counts that we've seen. It speaks a little bit to times and stress levels and the difficulty of the profession, but it's significant. That 5 amount is a Down below, what I did there in previous years, I had noted all of them together, but I just took the last 2 years of where these departures came from and noted them here. It's pretty evenly spread out. You know, if we had been flooded, for example, in a place like Tech Ed, it would be, you know, really problematic. But the departures have been pretty uniform, you know, across disciplines, if you will. Any initial questions?
Just off the last part you covered, I like that it's broken out because we can see also if there's a problematic area within the district, right? I'm just wondering if we could do that with the elementary level,
Like,
so we can tell if it's a specific school, we have something going on.
break it further?
Yeah, I mean, we need the four, right?
What?
We would need the elementary schools broken out into their own.
Yeah, probably.
And the only reason why I say that is because they're vastly different, although they teach similar things, right?
Right.
We know
There's-
they do operate independent of each other.
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind with that. Is one is breaking them down by schools, but even not further, but likewise breaking them down by if it's grade level or area, or maybe
Yeah.
elementary special ed or something like that. So we could get that kind of picture. But I agree with you. As I did this, it's a little peculiar because you have that elementary level and middle level at the 8 and 7. It might not tell the whole story. if you will. So I'm good with that.
Just reading into it a little bit, I would also assume times the elementary level, we have our newer teachers there. So if they're going to make that change, that could be done earlier in their career than later in their career with some of the incentives that we have that seem to cross.
Yeah. It's been, just trying to think of the particulars. It's kind of been, just like I said, in some cases there are situations where people are going closer to home.
Mhm.
Some people acknowledged potential of more money, although there's way, and we'll see that in the next agenda item, there's way more to that than sometimes meets the eye, which will be part of what we discuss.
Well, I think that comes to point when you have these, you know, these four categories, which, I mean, people, I know the way things are now, it used to be people stayed in the same profession forever. So is it fatigue? Is it, you know, I just don't like teaching anymore? Is it, you know, like the whys they left? I think those are kind of more important to us.
Yeah, and to clarify too, so this has been used, we know this about certified staff, teachers, administrators. A lot typically becomes teachers because the administrators are somewhat rare. But we will have teachers follow this process as well. So beyond just these, we'll be able to dig deeper with that as
Mhm.
well. So.
As we see the last 2 years, an influx, 16 and 17. 16 isn't out of the norm. Looks like 2021 we also had it. It's a slight uptick from 18 and
Right.
17 at 12 and 11 respectively. But as we see that, and we know there's a lot of factors that cause into it. So I think of the other side of this. We're replacing that staff. Have we reviewed or gone over our onboarding processes for staff across the board, certified or non, to ensure they're being brought in and up to standards for the Germantown expectations?
We've spent a lot of time recently talking about onboarding and offboarding, but in regard to onboarding in particular, our initial kind of perspective on onboarding, I would say, is far more procedural in nature. So in other words, you know, this is the technology you're receiving, this is the kind of the security measures relative to keys and devices and those kinds of things. Onboarding relative to benefits, it's an enormous part of it in terms of those kinds of decisions. Onboarding relative to school practices and sort of school culture, if you will, primarily occurs in our buildings. As people come in, though, they're They, we go through training with teaching and learning. They have mentors that, try to bring them up to speed on how we do things relative to teaching and learning and instructional practices. So, the answer to that is there's an awful lot there that, we could always get better at. And, I think, relative to other districts, I will say again, we're not on the high side in this. In fact, we even with our 16
Yeah,
numbers,
I was gonna say, I'll get to that in a second. The reason why I bring that up, and I think you're speaking generally to the certified side of life. We gotta remember the non-certified side. And we have people coming into roles that do great things for our district, but I don't necessarily know if all of the steps are in place to ensure a smooth onboarding outside of what you said, the technical
yeah.
insurance, HR, call it, stuff. But we need to make sure across the district as we fill some of these positions, and just from things we hear from time to time, I don't think that's the smoothest. We bring somebody in, they're a great candidate, and we might not give them the scaffolding to excel in that position as fast as they could. So we might want to look at that, because I think we have some great ideas as to where we're going to go to stem some of this, as far as leaving goes, but we need to make sure as we bring people in, we're giving them the support they need to really take ownership of their positions.
Do we know, are other school districts experiencing the same spike in the last couple of years as far as the amount of teachers leaving? Is it more unique to our district, or is it pretty much across the board where you're just seeing more teachers leaving, changing?
We're right there relative to being on the competitive side of not losing people. Like the 16 numbers, the data, I haven't seen the complete work yet. There's one district that does a study on this, and it's just about there. But I glanced quickly, and there are plenty of districts similar in size that are in kind of the 16 kind of range, 15 plus, some far more. So I don't say that to like toot our horn and say, hey, we're doing fine, because we don't want it to be zero, obviously. But everyone is experiencing this. And the interesting part of that is we, granted, now some of these later hires are new teachers, like they haven't been in the profession, but the vast majority of our hires are teachers that have experience and are coming to us from other places. That, all the things we're talking about, people leaving and whatnot, people are coming to us in kind of the same way. So
We can also add that pre-COVID, there
Yeah.
were studies coming out that there's a teacher shortage going into the university level. So less high school kids are going on to university to become a teacher. So those new teacher job market, you see not as many people applying, where it used to be you have an elementary position open, 100 applicants.
Mhm.
Now you get 20, you weed it out to about 6 or 7, but to Mr. Noack's point, it's a lot of moving from district to district, and what's the next career ladder from a financial standpoint I can jump to, or I want to work in this community, or I live in the community and I want to work there, or I really know that this district's on the up and up, or whatever it might be. So that is something. And then post-COVID, every school district in CISA 1 saw people leaving profession and change because of what was maybe experienced in the profession during COVID time, and it's going, okay, maybe I don't want to do this the rest of my career. And there's that sweet spot in years 3 to 10 of, okay, now I have to make a decision because of WRS and those type of things, if I'm going to stay in the position or I'm vested long term.
Well, and I guess would be the curious point too. Are these people that are leaving, are they, 1 year of teaching? Are they 10 years of teaching? To see
right.
where we're at as far as, this isn't the job I thought it was, I'm out, or is it people that are like, I'm done, and for what reasons, and how can we mitigate that?
I can't speak with specificity about that, but my gut to that is it's pretty rare for us to see people leaving who are, say, over like 12 years of experience. That's relatively uncommon, I agree. And that, a lot of times it's teachers younger. So as we get into, or less experienced, as we get into the discussion of compensation and sort of a comp model or structure, those are important considerations, because historically our model and other models are built on that you're gonna have a 30-year career in a district, and you know, a lot of times there are incentives at the end that is, you know, in retrospect now, maybe not the optimal way of thinking about it. Certainly, you know, familiar with a few districts that do everything they can to provide advancements early, and you obviously have to be considerate about you have to consider the financial implications of that, but it does mean something in this day and age too, to be able to offer people increases.
I mean, my take on this is you should always pay attention. You should always be concerned as people leave, because inevitably there's a certain percentage of those people who are leaving who are very good to excellent, and you wouldn't necessarily want to lose those folks. Sometimes you can control it, sometimes you can't. So the thing that tempers some of this concern is the fact that we are running the compensation study to make sure we're in that ballpark, that we can be competitive, make those changes so that a certain percentage of those people who may have left actually would stay. So those numbers may come down. The other thing too that tempers some of that concern is the fact that it doesn't seem like we've had a tremendous amount of difficulty filling those positions. Obviously, there's always a couple that are more difficult, as we've learned with the interpreter position, for instance. So I think it's one of those things where obviously people leaving, not necessarily always good. I'm sure there might have been even one or two that it was like, okay, maybe not the worst thing in the world, but that it's a numbers game, and so it's one of those things where I think those things should be on our radar. However, we are taking some action to potentially help mitigate some of those departures.
I know you said for 22, 23, 16 was probably on the low side, the lower side of
In the
comparable
area.
districts.
Mm-hmm.
What's the high side look like?
Well, you have to preface that with the size of the district has to be considered. So like,
Yeah,
you know, and
So
we do
percentages.
that. So like, we'll get like to pick on them, like a Waukesha might have like, I don't know, 40 or something like that. But
54 maybe.
From a
That's a-
percentage side, so it's equal, there were districts last year in CC1 that were 30+% of staff turnover.
Staff turnover. Mm.
Of teacher turnover.
yeah,
And we're at 5.4 for that late.
one
that
of
year.
our neighboring districts is double digits. I know that.
Mhm.
So close by neighboring district.
Mhm. So I think that helps put it in perspective. I mean, we can look at the raw numbers, and 19 is still 19 real people, right? So we can look at it at 6.5% compared to 30%. 19 is still real. But it helps to understand the percentages some of these districts are dealing with, where the turnover, and I think we set aside the biggest one in the area because that's just
Yeah.
Yeah.
a beast of on itself. So as long as we got apples to apples when we're having these discussions, and I think that'll be the theme as we roll forward with some more the continuing discussion tonight. It's important for us to be able to understand that, because when we start weighing in on decisions you're asking us to make based off of your recommendations, we can really bite into the data and say, I feel good, this is the correct recommendation, let's move forward with it. So this is what we were looking for this committee to continue to move forward. Thank you. E, compensation study update. And Dr. Reuter, I believe, are
I'll
you
let
stepping in
Mr.
or
Mark
no?
start, and I'll
Yeah.
chime in.
This is an exciting process. You know, we kind of gave an overview previously as to what would occur. And we're at a point right now where we'd like to begin sort of a report out of what we've seen. So the process, and we shared this last time, the process right now has involved us talking to a number of surrounding districts. I believe it noted here is Cedarburg, Grafton, Mequon, Menominee Falls, and Sussex. I had conversations with 5 of, no, there's 5 total outside of us. So I had conversations with 4 of those districts. Dr. Reuter had conversation with one of the other. And we asked sort of a consistent survey questions, or in a consistent manner, we kind of went through things with each of these districts relative to where they are. There's some things that, and I hope you've looked at this a little bit. There's some things that jump out. I guess just in general, I appreciated having these conversations, because they're conversations with people I know that were able to kind of give some depth to what they were experiencing. And, I could connect with and understand pretty clearly all the things that they were explaining. But as we go through this, I don't mean to jump right to the end, but there are some takeaways that are noted. And I think it might make sense for us to go to that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Russ.
I was gonna say, before we get to the summarization of what we have here, did you want to go walk through the process? I know the information you want to get to, and it's important, but do we want to have context to it before we get there, or do you want to jump straight to it?
So I think
Go
what
ahead.
you're asking is what those conversations look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mike and I created this table and put the Germantown variables in that we shared at previous personnel committees. And then Mike met with Cedarburg, Grafton, Hamilton, and Menominee Falls, their HR directors. And then I met with the Mequon-Thiensville superintendent. And we walked through and had the conversation sharing our information, and then asked for their information. Given this current year, and it's denoted whether it's 23-24 starting wage versus the median wage and average salary for 22-23 in the other areas, because some districts are not settled yet, similar to Germantown. So we wanted to provide where everyone was at the conclusion of last year, under last year's settlement for wage increase. And then we discussed our longevity incentives and understood what the processes were or weren't in place related to longevity in each district. You can see the Grafton one. Mike can speak to that in a little bit. There's a lot of information there. It's a unique way of going about it, but it seems like it's beneficial to the employment group there. And then it was important to discuss salary structure. Is it a traditional approach that here's the annual increase on top of base wage, or how that looks, or is it performance based? And you can see that there's 2 districts that do have a performance aspect. One of them is on hold this year given budgetary constraints. Some performance-based systems came out across the state post-Act 10 related to educator effectiveness and student outcomes, as well as teacher performance. So there might be a negotiated increase, but then additional wage added to that if you meet certain benchmarks as a teacher related to outcomes and district goals, usually related back to a strategic plan. And then one of the pieces that is, you can see here too, is master's attainment. Many districts abandoned that after Act 10, is that there's minimal research that supports that a master's in education improves teaching outcomes. That's different when there's a master's in a given discipline, subject, or field.
In some of those situations, the master's is a requirement for employment.
Correct.
Given example of like speech and language,
School psych. Anyone who
counseling.
teaches a CAP course at the high school level has to have a master's in their given discipline that they teach. And CAP courses equate to like a level 5, which lead to college credit for the students that complete that. And as well as then credit attainment is the similar. That was the pre-Act 10, many collective bargaining agreements had steps and lanes. You get so many credits prior to a master's, you get an increase, you move in that step, in that lane, and then post-master's as well. One area that we were very interested in, we got mixed reviews on feedback from the districts, was stipend pay. We tried to list out the range of stipends that are, if teachers so choose to go and do work outside of their actual regular teaching contract, whether it's some lunchroom monitoring at KMS or GHS, being a house leader, a department chair, members of different committees within the school, mentors, as Mr. Nowak talked to. That ranges from stipend pay of $450 to $2,300 per year, on top of, it doesn't go towards base wage, but it's on top of as a one-time or a semester pay. So you can see that that was varying, and some didn't provide too much information regarding that, as it's folded into different expectations, maybe of a department chair and those type of things. And then PD stipend, Mr. Miziak asks teachers at times to work on things outside of the school day related to curriculum, and so we wanted to see what that rate was per hour that took place around these comparative districts. And then something that comes to you often at the end of the school year is extended contract at their per diem. We see this specifically in pupil service with special education evaluations and some work that has to happen legally in the summer. So we wanted to understand how other districts are compensating if they do take the per diem rate and say, here's 10 additional days to get this work done at your per diem rate, or if there was a flat rate. You can see how that is justified for each district. And then training rate was similar to a curriculum rate for trainings that might relate to things that are not curriculum related. For instance, CPI training related to de-escalation techniques for students that have severe behavior needs. Is there a rate that we pay people to come in the summer to be trained around a new skill set? And then the curriculum rate there is there as well. So that was kind of, we had those conversations individually with each school district and the representative we met with, and then spoke to what that looks like in Germantown, so we could see if they had an apples to apples comparison. And if they didn't, they didn't. So that led to the takeaways and comparatives.
Just to reiterate, the starting wage was a glaring, you know, there's clearly, as you can see, differences with where we are relative to these others. And I think Dr. Reuter referenced, as we look at things like the median, we can dig back to the starting wage as being a big influence on that median number that you're seeing there.
Yeah, I look at it and I see, so just on that topic alone, you look at Germantown and Cedarburg, starting is 40 for us, 45 for them. Median is 63,255 for us and 62,682 for them. So we see
Yeah.
kind of a flip, but then you go to average salary, and we're at 63,216, and they're at 66,927. To me, the 30,000 foot view would tell me they might have a more experience-based staff that would raise their average salary up, but their median salary actually drops below ours at that.
Yeah, that definitely comes into play in this entire thing, kind of getting a pulse on where your staff is.
So when you put a scatter plot down of
Yeah.
all the employees, is that they're a big top-heavy, quadrant, and a quadrant of newer people, or is it all pushed to the middle? And that's why we wanted to show, not average can be misleading, because
Yeah, that's
right. So
what
that's
I'm
why we
getting at.
want medians. To your point, Mr. Ewer, you can see from a statistical standpoint what is the story being told here, and that's just base that piece. That's not additional pay. in this.
Yeah, 'cause I was gonna go into that side of it too, right? So we have, I'm trying to scroll down for that. There's a lot of information here. So that stipend pay. So theirs just is listed as traditional lunch, $20 an hour. But we have multiple listings under that stipend that could take you from $450 all the way up to $2,300. So if they're all taking advantage of, really 42.
Yeah.
And those are limiting positions. So
Right.
you think about a department chair at the high school, that ranges from $500 to $3,500, but it's dependent upon the size of your department. but there's only one English department
Correct.
chair, one social
Correct.
studies ones, and those don't rotate often.
Yeah, I would, and I don't think you would
So
want them
that
to.
that's a isolated to
Mhm.
usually veteran teachers who are already at the higher end of a pay scale as well.
Yeah, like for us, I look at lunchroom monitor, and I'm sure that flops always, but we know the house leaders don't at the middle school. I mean, they've been just about the same since I've been in the district. To what you're kind of discussing there, there's still positions there that there is an extra stipend for, but they don't.
It's not open to everyone.
The longevity piece is an important perspective. You know, it speaks a lot to, and as we look at all these districts, sort of a mindset relative to model. And as we get deeper into the work, you know, I think our recommendations, it's being fair to speak to them now, but this kind of thing is an important piece to consider. And some districts make a very concerted effort to move those, if they have them, move those bumps sooner in a teacher's career. As we talk about, you know, trying to look at the 30-year window, we're looking at, if we have somebody here for 10 to 12 years, there's a good chance we're going to have them, you know, for the long haul.
So I look at it and I see, kind of draw the analogy of we're building a pyramid upside down, right? So if we start off with a 5-year, you have 750, then 5 more years, 1250, 1750, 2250. So you're getting paid for what you've done, so to speak. Whereas almost if you'd reverse that,
Right.
you'd build a great foundation and pay them the incentive for being here and continuing to be here,
Yep.
which would close that $40 to $4,500 gap and outrace that to that mean even faster.
Yeah.
Which you see Grafton and Hamilton do. Their job is to
Right.
escalate and get people to a point, because then market-wise, you're less likely to move because other districts aren't going to bring you in at that.
Correct.
Salary
And if
or
we're
higher.
that exactly that.
Hamilton doesn't specifically call it a longevity bump, but they look at, they use the language of, if someone is 5 years into a career, we believe they should be at this salary, and they will advance them accordingly. But they pick out, I think it's 1, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20, so they don't go beyond that, which to your point is a little bit like us, you know, but there's a strong emphasis on those, you know, 4 bumps in the first 10 years as opposed to, we have 2, you know, and I'm pretty certain they're
I don't know. I might be in the minority on it, but when I look at longevity pay, my experience with it, it always seems to be pay for what you've done instead of what you're currently doing. I don't know. Some people look at it, and I think it depends on mindset, as a carrot. That if I stay here for another 2 years, I'm going to get this $12.50. But if I leave now, you know, if that's flipped, and they've invested in me, that at $22.50, my next one will be $12.50, and then $7.50 down the road. But I've accumulated more
right.
sooner, so we don't have that 3-4 year to the decision making process of am I in this for the long haul waiting, or am I in a dead period of the career and I have to find a different district to compensate that, or a different career altogether to figure that out. It's just we're not making any decisions off it. It's just my logic when I see it.
So, this information is going to be very important for us when we get to the point of speaking with staff members, speaking in a deeper way about possibilities. These are districts that are very close to us. There are things that we can do to put us in this place, put us in a place of being competitive. I think this process, really from the first one we did, I thought was interesting, just perspective wise, in terms of really all these districts, we're all having the same conversation. We just either are a little further along with it, or we've looked at it in unique ways, sort of from the get-go. So, and a lot of it does come back to post-Act 10 decisions that groups made, which now are, in some cases, are kind of coming back. People rush to change, and they're realizing now some of the ways that they changed are unsustainable, and they were counterintuitive in some ways. They caused some problems too. So that will help us as we go.
Yep, so our next steps tonight was to inform with some data, the comparables. Our next steps over the next 2 months are to create protocols around focus groups with our teachers based on years of service that Mike and I will facilitate. We'll send out a invite, and then we'll determine size of focus groups based on demographic and variety. We can't have every teacher. We have to control variables, so it'll be based on years of experience. So for instance, one group would be 1 to 6 years of service, and then we'll look for representation from each of the levels and possibly multiple elementary schools, not only for regular ed but also special ed, so that and then we'll set those variables for each of the levels to then continue with those questions or those focus groups, and then provide a thematic assessment of that to the personnel committee and then to the full board to see what our employees are saying based on years of experience in their given roles and how that relates to the quantitative side of things, and then bring forward recommendations to the committee and full board in the spring.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments regarding? I definitely think we're on the right track. I think from what I've heard, it seems like we're kind of, as a district, breaking down some of the stereotypes, specifically communicating with other districts on this information in a manner in which to make us a better, more competitive district. I know that's been an interesting conversation for the two of you outside of these walls, I'm sure, and your experience outside of the walls too, but I think this can only bring us to a better spot for the district, so we're going to keep marching forward with it. I appreciate all the information. There's a lot in here. I'm sure people can read into as much or as little of it as they want. I would ask for the continued patience as knowing that the district's moving in the right direction with this. So we're data gathering now, not decision making. But we're going to get there, and the first step was, what is everyone doing around us? And now internally, what are our internal needs, right? That's the next portion. And I'm excited to see and hear what that looks like. So good stuff. With that, we can move on to 6. Unfinished business, we have none. Item 7, new business, we have none. And I'll move on to item 8 if somebody wants to make a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Wait a second.
Tracy with the motion, Kim with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. With that, I'll call this meeting to close at 6:04 p.m.